Hello, once again, we're going to pick up where we left off last time. I'm at a different location again. I've tried this several times and been interrupted. I'm actually at work. I try to do this in between stuff. Sometimes the phone will ring. A lot of times it's spam, so it's very frustrating. But we're going to try this time to get through it. We're examining different translations. I came to the point when I was in the hyper-fundamentalist churches that I had to make a decision as to what I was going to do as far as believing the King James only issue. Like any other, a lot of the other things that I was taught, I had to re-examine. This was one of them. Went over last couple of videos what I had come to, the conclusions that I came to. This time I like to look into choosing another translation. If we're looking either or keeping the King James. The issues to look into. The first thing that I like to mention is that I am coming as a pastor. I'm not coming as a linguistic scholar. If you want the real technical stuff, then you can find that on the internet. I'm just giving you the things that I've experienced and the conclusions that I came to with the abilities that I have. So that's something you can examine to see if it's helpful or not. But one of the things that when you're looking at a Bible translation, the thing to look at is the source. That is, which manuscript or what manuscripts did they come from? The Reformation Bibles, as I call them, the King James, the Tyndale Bible, the Luther Bible, the Geneva Bible. Those Bibles came from a family of manuscripts called the Byzantine family. The Textus Receptus came from that. There are many of them. However, they're not as old. They're more recent manuscripts. The other translations, such as the NIV, the ASV, the ESV, the Revised Standard Version, these all came from the Alexandrian family, which are older manuscripts, but they are very few in number. So that's where the scholars have to decide, which is more accurate, which is closer to the original. They battle back and forth over these issues. For the most part, most scholars now accept the Alexandrian manuscripts over the received text, over the Byzantine family, because of the age. Now, we can debate about those things, and there's plenty of that on the internet. I, however, prefer the other Bibles, the Bibles that come from the same source as the King James, well, partly because I prefer to rely on a proven manuscript, on a proven translation. This particular family has a good pedigree. You look at it, the Luther Bible, the Tyndale Bible. These were the Bibles of the martyrs, the Bibles of the reformers. Now, of course, maybe if they had the access to the other manuscripts, then perhaps they would have chosen the others. I don't know, but I just know what's been done and what has been done with this particular Bible, and I'm very reluctant to leave that. I see what Whitefield and Wesley did in the preaching from the old King James. So that particular family of Bibles, I am reluctant to leave. Now, on the flip side, the other side of that is these newer translations came during a time where they began using these older manuscripts during a time of spiritual declension and apostasy. Rome had its hand in that a little bit, so that makes me a little bit wary of them. I'm not certain I want to discard what I have and pick up the other translations, simply because if they come from that particular manuscript group, and that group came during this period of church history, where it came to prominence during that time, it was promoted by Rome, it's promoted by others in apostasy. I just feel funny about that. I may be wrong. I'm not going to argue those issues right now. I'm just saying how I feel about it. So I came to the conclusion I would rather find a translation based on the same text as the King James Bible. So that's one of the issues. The other is the difference in translation style. Translations of the Bible vary according to how they're translated. You get everything from a paraphrase to the interlinear Bibles, where it goes word for word. Where it's very difficult to read because it's so literal. So you have to try to find that good balance in between those. One is called dynamic equivalence, is thought for thought, and the other is formal equivalence, which they attempt to go word for word. And there's going to be mixtures of all that in between. The paraphrases, such as the Living Bible, are an extreme version of the one versus the interlinear. You can go as far as the interlinear. The English Standard Version, the King James Bible, the New King James, the American Standard Version are considered formal equivalent translations where they try to go word for word. The NIV, the Living Bible are the more dynamic equivalence type Bibles. So out of necessity, you're going to have a mixture of these styles within a translation. So the idea is to get as close as possible to the original, yet be able to understand it at the same time. So then I chose the New King James, but why did I do that? What was the purpose? Well, the manuscript evidence, the style of translation, it's readable, yet it's very close to the original, and my own background. I was raised on the King James Bible all my Christian life. And even prior to that, I had some influence from my mom, concerning the King James Bible. She'd read some on occasion to us. So I was more familiar with the King James. I like the cadence of the language. I like how it's easy to memorize. The NIV is very difficult to memorize. The King James is easier. So the New King James flows right with that, and making the transition to a more modern language, a more understandable language, much easier for myself as well as for my church. My church had used the King James for many years. We had an elders meeting about that. We discussed the topic that I would prefer to use the New King James for these reasons, and they were in agreement with that. So our church uses that. If I would have went to the NIV or something like that, or even the ESV probably wouldn't have been too much of a difficulty transitioning into that. But the New King James was much easier, so that's why we went with that. Now, finally, to close all of this up, there's a couple of thoughts just to tie all the loose ends together. We have to always keep in mind in this issue of King James onlyism that the King James translation, the English translation, is not the standard for the Word of God. People will say, look what's been changed in the Bible. They took this word and they made it into another word. They changed the Bible. No, they didn't change the Bible. You don't use the King James Bible as the standard. The English speaking, the English translation is not the standard. The standard is the Greek and the Hebrew. The question is not what did the King James say, but what does the original say? When you go back to the Greek and the Hebrew, that's the authority. So if a word could be changed, and maybe it's a little better as another word, well, you're not changing the Word of God. You're bringing out something from the original. So all these arguments would say that the new translations are corrupt because of that they changed the words. Well, the words aren't changed in the original. That's where you go to. So that's one thought, is that you don't make a translation the standard. You go with the original as the standard. The King James only position, though it may appear on the surface to be defending the Word of God, but in actuality they are undermining the Word of God. Because what they do is by locking that up into the English language rather than the authority of the Greek and Hebrew, they are holding back the Word of God from the people. And as I mentioned before, they are in the process of destroying the translation that they love, because eventually the language is going to change to the point that it's going to be dropped from use. If it's updated, and I believe that the New King James is a good update of that. There's differences, obviously, but I think it's keeping up with the new way of speaking, of understanding. I think then that we'll continue to use it, as many other churches have. So we have to be careful that we're not taking the clear hearing away from the new generation. They need to hear the Word of God clearly, and that we don't overstep and put the authority on a translation rather than the original. And that's the thought. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below in the comment section. And thanks again for your time.